What's up, Gator Nation? Welcome into the latest Gators Online show. Zach Albaverdi here, and happy holidays to all of you as we wind down 2024. I'm joined by Corey Bender and Keith Niebuhr of Gators Online, and we got a lot to talk to you guys about as we look back on this past season for the Florida Gators, assess the 2025 class, and talk about what's going on this week. And we'll kind of open the show with that as it's Under Armour All-America Game Week. And Florida kind of leads the way with the amount of commits that they have competing in the game, which will be January 2nd. But how are you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Just like you said, getting ready for 2025, but it doesn't really slow down for us too much. I know portal's about to start back up again too, but no, everything's going good.
Yeah, all good. Corey and I were in Orlando yesterday for media check-in day with the Under Armour All-America game. It was great for me, Zach. I just did the guys already signed. That was the easy part. I had Corey chasing around, not had him, but he was doing it, and I got to watch. It was really nice watching Corey do 90% of the work yesterday.
Well, it's obviously a unique setup now with juniors being able to compete in the game, and Florida's got their quarterback commit there this week. But obviously some headliners with Vernell Brown III, Dallas Wilson, who was certainly in the news a lot the last couple weeks. But kind of just to start, what was it like kind of revisiting with those guys as they showed up for check-in and kind of get to talk to them now that they're officially Florida Gators?
Yeah, and I'll take this one since Corey talked to the rising stars, the guys that are going to be in next year's class. Yeah, it was great. I mean, all of them feel very confident. We've got a story up at GatorsOnline.com. They all feel very confident that championships are on the horizon. And look, I know people on the message board say, oh, what do you expect them to say? I get that, but they gave their percentages as to what chance they think Florida could win a national championship in the next few years while they're there. And they're optimistic. And then they said why. And a lot of it revolves around DJ Lagway. A lot of it revolves around the great receivers room. Just the fact that the program seems to be, moving in the right direction. So I think if you're a Gator fan and you've been waiting for any kind of championship since 2008, I think that was the last national title and
Correct.
last SEC champion, if my memory's correct. If you just hearing it from these guys' mouths, I think is reassuring because you want to believe that better days are coming. And it's a solid class. There's 7 future Gators at the Under Armour All-America game. Now, one of them is Will Griffin. He's a junior, but 6 guys that are senior signees. Most of them are going to be in Gainesville in January. I know Byron Lewis, the running back signee, doesn't get there till the summer, but it's a confident group. It's a talented group. They're ready to get to Gainesville. They're ready to get to work. We'll have more content. I talked to them all about their year one goals. Guys like Vernell Brown are pretty measured. Hey, I'm going to help out any way I can. I'm just going to get in there and work hard, grind. And then guys like Nashawn Montgomery, he says, hey, I'm going to get in there and grind too. But he's pretty open about his goals. He wants 1,000 receiving yards as a true freshman. So is that attainable? Honestly, probably not. Corey's smiling. I mean, that's a big goal, right? That's like me saying I'm going to shoot 67 at Pebble Beach, but you're not going to hit it, but you're certainly not going to hit it if you don't try to hit it. So he's going in trying to hit it. He's got lofty goals. So again, a confident group, a talented group. They're ready to rock and roll in Gainesville. They believe in DJ Lagway. They believe in Billy Napier. They love the fans, and they're ready to be Gators. It's one thing to be a Gator commit and a Gator signee, but come January 12th, which I should point out is move-in day, they're going to officially be Gators, and they are jacked up about that.
Corey, before you get into the 2026 guys, just what are some of your impressions on some of these incoming freshmen and some of the
Did we freeze? I think we froze. You guys hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, what happened there? No, I think overall, I think it starts with the receivers class, man. I just think when you look at the class, but for Florida, in their case, it's going to be a lot of the skill guys. When you have Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, Nashawn Montgomery, Byron Lewis, these are all fun guys to watch on the field. I'm excited to kind of see Dallas Wilson. I think he's one of those. He's kind of raw, kind of work on skills and kind of firm up some of the things. I think he's one of the play threats with size that really gets you excited when you watch him on film. And obviously, Will Griffin, he's a 2026 prospect. We'll kind of get to see them. I spoke to him the other day. he says he's to kind of build an early connection with those guys. You know, obviously playing together for a year, kind of seeing them kind of build a connection, something we're all looking for doing. And but for me, I think Nation Montgomery, I think he said it really well. Like, he's one kid, you know, he's a deep guy, but obviously he's probably the least talked about in that wide receiver. So I a big time player as well. So I'm going to see him play out.
No doubt. And again, that game will be taking place on January 2nd. And a lot of highlights, I think, from Florida's 2025 class, but they also just wrapped up their transfer portal haul so far. The transfer portal officially closed this past weekend. The Gators right now have added 4 transfers from the 2025 cycle. And we think right now that they're done so far with high school signees. Maybe, you know, a few more additions that could still happen. They're still recruiting that Tennessee cornerback commit. But you guys recently regraded Florida's 2025 class after the addition of Dallas Wilson, the tight end as well. And then certainly we'll talk about the transfers too. But what do you guys make of this group so far and kind of the needs that they hit and some of the big pieces that they've added?
Well, I regraded it. I said we.
Yeah,
I did that to Corey so I could take some of the heat off me, quite frankly. So thank you, Corey. But yeah, I mean, look, it's a solid class. I mean, you've got, especially when you include the transfers. You know, you brought in a potential quarterback for the future, 2 of them. Deshaun Purdy, the transfer from Charlotte, but Tramel Jones, the big flip from FSU. Running back, you did really well with Byron Lewis, Waltez Clark. Receiver, obviously A+. Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, Nation Montgomery, Moise Toncourt out of Texas, who nobody's talking about, but Tramel Jones told me is the real deal. And then J. Michael Sturdivant, the transfer from UCLA. Defensive line, some really good pickups. Jeremiah McLeod had a huge senior season. Joseph Mbachu has got a bright future ahead of him. He's still got to learn how to play. He's new to the game. Linebacker Ty Jackson is phenomenal. Secondary, man, you got 3 studs, 2 safeties, Hilton Stubbs and Lagonza Hayward that probably are going to play early. And you got a cornerback in Ben Hanks, the second, or no, he's Ben Hanks the third, I want to say.
Third we confirmed.
Ben
That's
Hanks
right.
the third we confirmed. They call him junior for some reason, but he's Ben Hanks the third. The dude had 13 interceptions last year. I don't care where you're playing. That's a lot of interceptions. So
Yeah,
the future's bright. Now, again, the one concern is on the offensive line. You've got you didn't get too many big names, right? You got Tavares Dice, a late flip from Auburn, huge pickup, guard or tackle, probably a guard if you ask me. I think when you look at his arms, they're not super long, so he looks more like a guard. Corey may have a different take on that. The sleeper of the group may be this Daniel Pierre-Louis guy, who's Ty Jackson's teammate at Seminole Ridge, Loxahatchee. He was a flip from FSU too. And he's got a lot of potential. He's just kind of a road grader, old school mauler on the offensive line. So overall, good class. I guess offensive line is the one area if you're a Gator fan, and maybe a little bit defensive line too. Although Jaden Woods, I didn't even talk about. I know Corey loves him. He's going to get into that. To me, the offensive line would be the one area you still want to do some stuff in the portal. I know the fans, Zach, say, "Oh, there's all this young talent on the team. No big deal." Yeah, maybe, but they haven't done anything yet. We don't know. You really don't know till they're in the battles on Saturday. They may have a promising future, but we don't know that. So you got to reload every year. But overall, B+, A- type grade for the class, if you ask me. When you add in the transfers, still got some work to do in the transfer portal, though.
Yep. Corey, your thoughts just on the class, kind of now as it sits with Dallas Wilson, and we'll get into some of the transfers too.
Yeah, no. I'll just go over a few of the guys. He did a really good job just breaking all those guys down. But I think also the edge position with Jalen Wiggins, I think with him, I think he's a good locker room presence guy. A guy who's physically mature, some positional versatility too. He's a guy that wants to be in Gainesville. And obviously, I know a lot of these kids, they sign before they want to be there. Overall, he's for a whole year. Notre Dame was pushing down the but I think also kind of a guy that could really just be a good locker room presence. It's probably one of the nicer kids I've covered in recruiting. Keith touched on Jaden Woods. He's one guy I'm very excited about watching his film. And, Penn State always has a great reputation for those edge guys. And, getting a guy at that position, flipping him from Penn State, I think that says a lot, just kind of where he was on a board for a school like that. And I think he could be a guy who could be ranked higher when you watch him. Very explosive off the edge, plays light on his feet, can really turn the corner. just wreaks havoc on the edge. I just think when you watch his film, he's kind of what Florida needs. And, obviously, as a true freshman, you have to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. But I think it's a guy who can play as a traditional linebacker, too. So I think they're downfield. But I think there's also some positional versatility with him as well. And then also just to kind of piggyback off what Keith said with the safeties, I think that's a really, really strong group. When I do these evals on kids, I always try to point out a few things they have to improve on and stuff that kind of shows on film. Hilton Stubbs is one of those players. It was tough. When you watch his film, he has a really impressive film. I mean, comes downhill and really kind of lays the wood and really comes with thunderous hits. High points the ball well, good size. He's one guy I think who can play fairly early. And last one, Lagonza Hayward. He's a guy a little bit more physically mature, a little bit more than Stubbs, but a guy that kind of does everything at the high school level. I call him like Mr. Do-It-All for his high school. He could have been a D1 receiver. He probably fits star position early on, but he has a frame where he can maybe be a linebacker down the road too. So I think getting those two guys, flipping them from Miami and Tennessee, that was really big down the stretch. So I think you got to be pleased with those two positional groups.
Before we change topics on the transfers and kind of the needs that they've hit so far and what they still have left, I want to ask you guys kind of a off-topic question, but not really. But Corey, you just mentioned it. What do you guys think of the prospect of Vernell Brown III potentially playing both sides of the ball in college? His dad did it. He's done it in high school. He did it all throughout the playoffs as a senior. And I know if you talk to his dad, he will tell you that he's just as good of a cornerback as he is a wide receiver. And we certainly know that that's gotten some notoriety for some guys in the past, most notably Travis Hunter. I don't think we'll see Vernell do anything like that in terms of snap count. But what do y'all think about that? I'll throw it to you first, Keith.
Yeah, I talked to him yesterday about it, and I just threw it out there. And yeah, he said he'd do whatever the typical Vernell Brown III answer. I'll do whatever the team needs me to do. I think he'd like to focus on receiver. I think he sees himself as being a receiver. You know what I mean? But look, he's going to be in the return game. He's going to be on special teams. Right. And he knows that's a good place to make your mark early in your career because a lot of guys just don't want to do it. Or if they do, they don't maybe, I don't know. He really wants to do it. So same with Nashon Montgomery for that matter. So, I mean, it's possible. Maybe if there ends up being a logjam, let's say, at his receiver position, maybe Florida says, well, we got to get this guy on the field. Remember when one of the Pouncey brothers was a freshman, they played on the defensive line, right? Remember that?
Yes, correct.
And so maybe, maybe we could see something like that. If especially like just hypothetically speaking, look at all the injuries Florida had in the secondary.
No doubt. Like they had to move Bridges from safety to corner.
Yeah, I've never seen that many injuries. It makes you wonder why is it happening. But is one school just unlucky? I don't know, but maybe. But potentially. But I think he sees himself as a receiver. I mean, look, I think it would have to be a case like that where the need is there, or maybe he just, hey, I've got 18 catches, but if I go on the other side of the ball, man, I'm going to be involved in 748 plays. Because a DB has got to be lights on every single snap. So what fits his personality better? He'll figure it out as time goes on. But I think he definitely sees himself as a receiver first.
Thoughts on that, Corey?
Yeah, no, I think he definitely has the ability, but I think like what Keith said, it would have to probably be a situation when there would be injuries, something would come up, but also maybe him voicing that to the staff, him kind of putting those wheels in motion. Hey, I'm making an impact on offense. I'm getting some catches, but let me go over the deep and get some reps. And I think it would have to be one of those things to kind of accelerate it. But also, I think too with DK, with him graduating, him moving on, I think it opens up that punt return. One of the best punt returners in the class nationally. I know Charles Powers said the same thing. On three director of scouting and rankings, he kind of voiced the same thing. So I think those two roles obviously come to mind, and obviously as a kick returner too. But you never know, man. I mean, you never know. He's one of those guys that like he said, you just want to get on the field. He's a special player, and I just think it would have to be a situation, injuries or him voicing that and kind of putting the pressure on Florida, be like, hey, this is what the kid wants. But I think, returner and receiver, most likely.
If I could point out one thing, I asked him yesterday about his speed. We were talking about other receivers ranked ahead of him and why they might be ranked ahead of him. He's just curious how the process works. He's a very inquisitive young guy, and I think that's going to bode well for him in the film room and in positional group meetings. I mean, very inquisitive, very intelligent. Did he get that from Vernell II? I don't know about that. Maybe the mom. No, he just like his dad, quite frankly. So, but I will tell you this: I asked him about his speed. He said he runs a 10.8. He never ran track. So, if you're wondering if he's fast enough to play corner, because maybe if you don't know, you don't know, right? But he runs a 10. He said he's running 10.8. That would lead me to believe he's fast enough to play corner. And even though he's 5'10 and a half, not the biggest dude in the world, he plays bigger than his size.
He can jump.
He's not jacked up. He's not a big giant muscle, but he is in very good shape. He's put together. So I think he could probably do it. Listen, Zach, he'd probably do whatever he wanted to do if we're being told. Look, I bet he could play running back. He ain't much smaller than the running back. I mean, he could play about anything. He's a very talented guy.
Well, and I think you guys are both right. It would probably have to happen out of a necessity because of injuries. But, man, we've seen Florida just go through their cornerback depth chart. And if he was there this year, I bet you he would have taken some reps at corner.
It makes you real with Travis Hunter too. It makes you like maybe with schools across the country, you see that a little bit more, not all the time, but seeing how he made an impact, maybe it's going to kind of nudge a few coaches and kids along the way. You never know.
I'm with Corey. I wish they would, because in high school, like Vernell played DB somewhat during the year, but in the playoffs, he played both like every down. And it's like, man, if a guy, I mean, it's not like a receiver. They're not going to catch 14 passes a game. A lot of plays, it's just a snap and they push the guy. It barely counts. So you're not really exerting that much energy. And so you wonder if a guy's elite, why not? I mean, the elite high school teams do it. And also, would it increase a guy's NIL value if he's a two-way player? I mean, more guys may be saying, hey, I'm playing both positions. Okay, if you want me, I better get snaps at both because I want to make more money. Okay. And so maybe that element factors in too. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Corey hit on something that might become more attractive for guys that have that ability to want to ask for that or offer to do that to the coaching staff, saying, hey, if you have a need, I'll go over there and take some reps. And I think Vernell certainly is someone that could fit that bill. Before we get to the transfer talk, I do want to give an ad read real quick and let Florida fans know about Rowback. For those who aren't familiar with Rowback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rowback just released their new licensed game day collection, and it's awesome. Novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from your favorite schools, including the Florida Gators. Definitely worth checking out. There's nothing on the market that's pairing with these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Use the code Gators20 on rowback.com for a generous 20% off all new customers through the end of this year. So this is the final week for you guys to take advantage of this deal. And you can go to rowback.com. That's RHOBACK.com. And for 20% off of your performance polos, shorts, and more using the code Gators20. Now, before we turn the talk to this football team and kind of what's ahead and looking back on 2024, I do want to just talk about the transfers real quick. Florida's gotten 4 so far. We kind of highlighted the needs for the Gators right before the portal opened. They were quarterback, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive back, and punter. As the portal played out, certainly edge became a need for the Gators as well. And now they've addressed most of those needs. They still have some left. What are your thoughts on kind of the work that they've done so far and maybe some of the biggest additions?
I'll go if you want, Corey. It's up to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll just touch real quick. I mean, obviously, Keith, I mean, I know you said before, Zach, punter. I mean, they got a guy who's experienced from Michigan, a guy that obviously was a starter there. So obviously that's good to get that out of the way. And obviously quarterback, it's a backup quarterback, but we know in the SEC, obviously with this year too, with injuries, how often that could happen with DJ and Graham both going down at different periods of time. So I think a guy with Deshaun Purdy, you had Georgia offer, North Carolina, Mississippi State. You kind of solidified having that number 2 quarterback on the roster. And I think a lot of people are going to look at the numbers, only 4 guys in the class. It's not a big class. A few other guys are still pursuing, especially in the secondary. But I still think overall they got some good guys. I think Spurrier, the wide receiver from UCLA, an experienced guy who played at Cal as well. Kind of reminds me of the mold of Badger, a bigger guy. They need to replace him with Badger going. So you get another big body receiver with experience. And obviously, I know some people point at his production going down over the last couple of years, but obviously quarterback play plays a role in that too. It wasn't the best quarterback situation for him. So, but I think adding him in Gainesville, you look at Florida's receivers class in high school. It's obviously a strong group, but inexperienced, so you need to still bring in those guys. I think getting him was a big addition. And I think Kofi Asar, the UMass edge. I talked to another assistant in the SEC who, when I voiced about this pickup, and they said, man, we really wanted the guy, really wanted to pursue him, but obviously they didn't get the green light from the head man up top, from the head coach. But it was a guy that a lot of big name schools were very high on, and they think he has a high upside. So people look at the whole UMass thing, but you look at a lot of these guys that have came in from smaller schools. There's been a lot of success rate, with going to these bigger schools. So it's obviously not the biggest class, but I think they definitely hit on some positions of need, and there's still some push out.
And I think it's important to point out too that they didn't have a lot of scholarship room. We just put out the latest scholarship update at Gators Online. I mean, there's not a lot of spots.
Yeah.
Well, and you can still bring guys in these next couple of weeks, and then you've got a spring portal window. Go through spring practice. If
More
guys just
will come then.
And Badger was a spring one too, right?
And let's suppose a guy's in year 2 or year 3, and you got big expectations for him, and then they just kind of go out and don't have a great spring, and you think, okay, he needs to be playing. He's not going to play here. We're going to work with him to get him to another school, but then that would open up a spot. So there's always some attrition in that regard. But I'll just talk about Purdy really quick, and then the punter. Purdy, obviously, Corey mentioned Georgia offered him. North Carolina with Bill Belichick brought him in for a visit. They didn't really push at the end because they had somebody else, but they liked him. Mississippi State offering. Jeff Lebby's a QB guy. So people see the potential. I talked to a defensive coordinator that faced him last year. He said, look, I think this is a great pickup for Florida. Not for right now. Yes, he can be a depth piece right now, but for the future. Super raw. But when they broke down his film last year, they saw a guy that wasn't very good in week 1. And they saw a guy that had jumped 5 levels by week 10. Okay. And he's got 5 more to go before he'd even be anywhere near ready to be an SEC guy. But the potential is there. He's confident. He's ready to get in there and work. Maybe in a couple of years it works out and you got something. I mean, remember who he ended up playing over, and I don't know all the situation there, but Charlotte actually paid guys. They paid 6 figures, I'm told, to bring in Max Brown, the former Gator backup. I heard it was north of $200,000. Now I don't have that confirmed, but I don't mind throwing that out there because it's been told to me by multiple people. But they liked him a lot. But this was the guy that was your quarterback at the end of the year. Now, maybe Brown was dealing with some injury, but point being, he was a true freshman and he did that. Now, at the punter position, when you look at the statistics, Jeremy Crawshaw, you're talking about one of the best 5 to 10 punters in college football over the last 5 years. The guy they're bringing in, Tommy Doman from Michigan, his stats are nearly as good. Couple yards less, net punting 6 less, but net punting could be one guy had a 100-yard return. And that just threw the net off for the season. I don't know. But also you have to factor in this. When you kick up north, the ball doesn't maybe travel as far. So there's factors there. But I did talk to somebody on Florida staff and was told, and I brought this up. I go, wait, his stats aren't nearly as good as, a 2-yard difference is significant in punting. And he said, no, this guy's a real one. So Florida thinks that was their top punter target. They got him. They think they've got a dude that we won't even really notice any drop-off from Jeremy Crawshaw. You can't take that stuff for granted. Florida's still not blowing people out, guys. We know this. They're still winning games where you need those 2-3 extra yards on every kick, on every return, on every catch, right? Every yard.
Jeremy made a big impact this year.
That's right. And so, they think this guy's a significant pickup. And boy, I tell you what, you got to give Joe Houston credit for coming in. And special teams aren't perfect, but obviously getting the right number of guys on the field was again something that came up in the bowl game. But they're on point otherwise, and they think this guy can continue that. So
what was worse for Joe Houston was getting trucked by Bryce Love.
By the way, I met Joe Houston, and he is they got a lot of nice people on that staff. What a great engaging, you know what I mean? You see that he's a guy that people would like to play for. I'm guessing he's just a cool dude.
Well, yeah, you mentioned it, Keith, and you can kind of segue us right into that. Florida is now officially wrapped up its 2024 season. It's not over for all the teams still bowling, and then certainly the ones alive in the college football playoff. But the Gators are done. Finished with an 8-win year. I think all of us were pretty accurate on our predictions this season at Gators Online. We all posted great records. You guys, man, y'all called that Ole Miss game. That was one that you guys got right. I got wrong. I called the LSU win, but Florida, man, down the stretch to close it out with a 4-game winning streak, just a totally different feel compared to where it was in 2023 with the 5-game losing streak. As you guys look back on this season, what do you think about what was accomplished and kind of what that does to set up the future?
No, I just think overall, man, it was just such a whirlwind of a season. When you kind of break it down and you go back and forth about where the program could have been, if I talked to a recruit yesterday, and they even said the same thing. They said some of these schools would have packed it in to a certain degree and be like, hey, obviously it's not our year, and everyone kind of thought Billy Napier was going to be on the out. But the fact that Billy Napier kept coming in, they said, with a positive attitude, trying to get the guys better. It's not easy kind of doing that midseason turnaround the way Florida did, especially against ranked opponents like LSU and Ole Miss. But yeah, like you said, Zach, I mean, the fact that where they were at the early of the season to the very end, and obviously with DJ Lagway, you don't like to see any guys get hurt. I mean, Graham Mertz, the quarterback, but it was valuable, really good experience for DJ Lagway, who's looked at as the future of the program. So you got him valuable experience going to his sophomore year. That was accomplished. And I think overall at running back, you just look at overall, just you have some familiar names coming back. And I just think overall, man, I just think just the way they were able to kind of stay focused and turn around the whole season was incredible. Obviously, it wasn't – you want to have – obviously, have more wins on the record, but Florida was to the very end. I just think their resiliency, the way they kept fighting. And I heard a few kids, you just saw – just put some younger guys in and just kind of the next. Very difficult to do, and the way Florida did that, Napier got another year. I just think, that's the main thing for me. The team just kept battling.
Yeah, as we're recording this, I'm looking at there's transfer stuff happening right now. Florida has reached out to a linebacker, but I think you got to give them credit for not quitting, obviously, but I kind of disagree. And with, a lot of people say, they were playing for their coach. I don't doubt that they like their coach, but, I think one thing, for all of NIL's faults, and Zach, I think you and I have talked about this before, for all of NIL's weirdness that it's added to the sport, if you quit now, you're not going to get a raise as a player. Your value is not going to go up to be able to maybe transfer or to whatever. And so these guys didn't quit, and now they're all basically getting raises, and the ones that are leaving are getting raises too. And so it was a win-win for everybody. They helped really, make Billy Napier's life easier. They bettered their own lives. They made the fans happy. And so maybe NIL isn't so bad all the way around. But, the reason I picked, and by the way, I also picked Florida to beat Miami, and I also picked them to beat Texas A&M. I don't know what I was thinking, but the reason why I picked them to beat Ole Miss was because, one, Ole Miss has a history of flopping in big games, if we're going to be totally honest. They haven't been in that many recently, but it's not their strength. They're still figuring out how to win those games, and maybe they will someday soon. But then also, Florida was playing with an energy, giving up a lot of yards. Corey and I always tell Corey, he probably gets sick of me telling him this, let's not count the stories we write. Let's write the stories we count. And so, or write the stories that count, excuse me. So Florida was giving up a lot of yards, but they were making the plays that counted on defense. So if you go back to that Ole Miss game, Ole Miss left a lot of points on the field. Now you could say, okay, maybe Florida did against Tennessee. I mean, it goes both ways. I'm not saying that, and I'm not being negative, but Ole Miss left a lot of points on the field because Florida kept them from getting those points. Florida made those big plays when it counted. So at the end of the game, Ole Miss had 460 yards, but Florida made sack after sack and interceptions and thwarted this drive and stopped the fourth down here and stopped the fourth down there. And by the end of the game, Ole Miss had only 17 points. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're thinking it's self-inflicted. But if you're Florida, you're saying, no. We did what it took to win the game. Okay? Statistics, and it was Steve Spurrier who said this, are for assistant coaches and losers, the losers of the game. And so they won the game. They got outgained by FSU. Doesn't matter. They won the game handily. FSU Florida didn't play its best. Florida was not that good that night, but won by 20 points. Okay. Tulane just blew them out of the water. I mean, there were extenuating circumstances there. You never know what you're going to get in a bowl game. Both teams were missing guys and all that stuff. But the bottom line is Florida was a much better team in the second half of the season. Could have won at Tennessee, obviously, but could have lost to LSU or could have lost to Ole Miss. So it goes both ways. Their record probably is indicative of what they were. But if you look at the pieces and then you look at this one factor, and I'll let y'all off the hook here. I'll stop at some point. Florida's learning how to win.
Yeah.
That is such an important – nobody ever thinks about that. Oh, do we have the players or do we not? Are we throwing to the tight end enough? Are we running the ball? Are we doing – do they know how to win? The Ole Miss game to me is proof positive. It's Exhibit A. These guys are learning how to win, okay? Making the plays when it counts. Now, each season is its own separate entity. One season does not extend into the other. Everybody thinks if you win your bowl game, you're destined for it. It doesn't work that way. It's a whole new season, a whole new team, whole new group of people, but they're learning how to win. The guys that come back will know what it's like and know what it takes to make plays and win games when it's crunch time. The last couple teams didn't know that. They had forgotten that. A lot of Florida teams have forgotten that. This one learned how to win again. And maybe that's something they could take into 2025.
Good stuff, guys. Just to kind of put a bow on that, you know, as unfortunate as it was for Florida to have both of its starting quarterbacks go down, you know, I think that's something that's really unique about this season when you look back on it because, you know, in 2025, Georgia and Tennessee are going to have to see DJ Lagway for 4 quarters. And that didn't happen this year. Now, obviously, in the Tennessee game, different circumstances. He wasn't the quarterback yet that he had kind of developed into by the end of the season. But nonetheless, you know, Florida goes down in that game with their starting quarterback and Graham Mertz, and they had a 10-0 lead. And Tennessee ended up being a playoff team. Most teams in that situation on the road with your starting quarterback and then replacing him with a true freshman don't find a way to continue to be competitive in that game. Florida did get themselves down. DJ Lagway struggled, but then when it was time to make a play, as Keith talked about, made an incredible touchdown pass to DK to force overtime. And that was kind of the start of the magic that we got to see with DJ Lagway. Obviously, he gets the Gators up against Georgia with a 10-3 lead. Unfortunate to see him go down with that hamstring injury. And at that point, you think Florida's they're over. It's over for this game. And they find a way to compete and take it all the way down to the wire with Aiden Warner against the Dogs. I think those 2 games, what happened with the starting quarterbacks in both of them and the way Florida responded and were competitive at the end against 2 playoff teams, that speaks volumes. Now, I feel for Florida fans and probably agree with them that obviously would have been great if DJ never gets hurt. I would have loved to see how that game at Texas would have went with a healthy DJ Lagway. But I will say it did set up quite the storyline and finish for Florida because they went to Austin, Texas and just got absolutely shellacked. And they didn't have Lagway. They didn't have Badger. George was out as well. Certainly Pup Howard, I think that was the game that he got hurt. Just everything went wrong for Florida at Texas, and it would have been so easy at that point to fold and to not have the stretch that they did to close out the year. But it almost – the way that it played out and the way that the story unfolded, it set up for this moment against LSU where DJ Lagway came back from injury, came back into the starting lineup. The Gators are wearing their big game blues against LSU. and they pull off this upset with him back in the lineup, and it just like it created more magic around this guy. And reading back on all your guys' recruiting interviews after the game, Napier doing the gritty in the locker room, Dallas Wilson was there for that game, a lot of other big names. Like, I just think that kind of set up a turning point for this team, for the season. It helped the Gators find their identity. Obviously, it made them very attractive to recruit. So, again, it's unfortunate the way things played out with the injuries, because I think if they don't happen, Florida might beat Tennessee, and if DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt against Georgia, they might beat Georgia. But it also set up for a really triumphant finish and kind of speak to how important DJ Lagway was as a quarterback and what he means to this program.
Zach, can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
I guess the one singular memory for me from this season, it actually has nothing to do with on the field. It was after the LSU game. I was under the stadium and waiting to interview recruits under the south end zone where the elite recruits come out of the Gators locker room when they're done and then leave. And an hour after the game ended, I still heard the chants. It's great to be a Florida Gator reverberating. It's great. And it reminded me, and look, that's not uncommon, but a lot of times people don't understand. You're in the stadium after the game. Corey and I are out of the stadium interviewing recruits. And it reminded me of a game I was at as a kid in the 80s as a little guy. The Florida won a big game against Auburn and had Georgia the next week. And the chants. There was excitement building again, man.
Yeah.
And to me, that encapsulates, and I'm sure it's happened after wins over, whatever.
But it hadn't happened a lot. It hadn't happened a lot, though,
yeah.
Keith.
But there was an energy after that LSU game that I hadn't heard, and I heard it again, the Ole Miss game, but that game specific, an energy that I hadn't heard or felt. And it felt like, I don't know, I'm being a little bit nostalgic and putting it all together here, but it felt like things were coming together. It felt like people were pulling in the same direction again. It felt like better days were coming. Better days are always ahead, but it felt like now there was evidence to go along with that. The head and the heart were sinking, right? And it was just a kind of a magical moment to hear that in Florida Field, or the Swamp, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. I still call it Florida Field. It's been a while, and then they never lost again. And so the trajectory of the program seems to be going up now. Like every season, like I said, is its own thing. They got to go out and do it again and then some next year. They can't just go 7-5, 8-5 again next year. Now it's time to take another step. But that was one moment that I really probably won't ever forget.
What's your highlight or favorite moment from the season, Corey?
My favorite highlight, what Keith said definitely is kind of on track with kind of what I was thinking too. I just think overall, when it comes to this past season, I just think it was just the excitement around some of the young players and really just kind of having belief in them. I think for me, there was just, I think after last season's loss against Arkansas, there was kind of this stain on the program where everyone's like, man, like, here we go. It's like, this is kind of like the momentum's going down. And obviously when they got DJ Lagway and he started coming in, I just felt like there was a different energy. I think with Graham Mertz, obviously I think they needed him at the beginning of the season to kind of lead DJ into the action. But I just think that excitement came back, like he said, just excitement from the fan base, that belief. And with us covering the game, it just makes it that much better. The atmospheres are so much better when you're a part of those type of situations. And obviously they found their future star running back. You have DJ Lagway at quarterback. I just think having those guys, having that belief again, I think that's the biggest thing for me. It makes it fun for us to cover. And, it kind of brings that excitement back. And it helps recruiting too, because there was a point during the season where when we thought Napier probably wasn't going to come back, you reach out to kids and, they weren't offering many guys. Recruiting was kind of stale. And that kind of affects us. Like, wait, what are we going to write about? Yeah, we're looking at JUCO kids, seeing if they're just having contact with Florida. And a lot of these kids didn't have offers. So they kind of, when you see that excitement around a certain player like they did with DJ, it kind of just makes our job much easier, much more fun to cover. And I just think having a star player like him come into the program and makes it that much more exciting for the fan base. And that kind of carries over to our job, and just being in those environments, definitely makes it all worth it.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to cover when things are trending in that direction. Get to our final ad read before we put a bow on this show and 2024 here at Gators Online. And as we do each and every episode, I want to give a shout out to myperfectfranchise.net, a longtime sponsor of the show. We appreciate them being with us not only this year, but since we've been at Gators Online. If you haven't checked them out, and you're ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help. He's a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner, and he's helped people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net or calling or texting him at 404-973-9901. Final thoughts here from Gators Online. Keith kind of alluded to it right there at the end, but kind of heading into now year 4 for Billy Napier's program, coming off of certainly the best season and best stretch that they've had. They have recruiting momentum. They got a lot of pieces coming back. We know what the schedule looks like, and I think there's already been some expectations set for next year. But just when I write that, you guys see that on the screen. What do you guys feel like is the state of the program right now, heading into 2025, and maybe more importantly, what expectations should be from fans, and certainly we'll get national pundits throughout the offseason chiming in as well.
Keith can start with this one.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, it's great the finish, right? But a season isn't judged solely on the finish. It's judged by what you did from start to finish. So Florida's still a 7-5, 8-5 team. That's okay. That's better than where they were. But now you take the next step. You've got to, and they know this, because if they fall backwards next year, there probably will be no 5th season. Okay. So they've got to continue to move forward. They know that. We're all big boys, adults. We know this, right? But they've got to continue to make steps and make progress and move forward. They've learned how to win. I think of all people, it might have been Bobby Bowden that said, and I've repeated this a few times, first you lose big, then you lose close, then you win close, then you win big. Florida is in that win close thing now, right? Stage 3. Stage 4 is you start blowing away better teams. You start winning more of those games. The Ole Miss games aren't anomalies. They become the norm. Okay.
Yep.
So they can get there. Everybody's got to get better. They've still got some pieces to fill. We don't know what staff changes are coming. We could have there's always staff attrition. We've already seen Austin Armstrong leave.
Yep.
So that changes certain dynamics. We've heard of other potential changes. So, we're going to see, but they've just got to keep moving forward. When you look at that schedule next year, man, it ain't any easier. In fact, I think it's more difficult next year, because you're talking about week 3. The difference is you've got a couple games you probably should win early to get you some momentum, to get your combinations worked out, and who can play and who can't. So that should help. But week 3
Long Island and USF.
Yeah. So week 3, though, at LSU. Week 4 at Texas. Week 3 at LSU. Week 4 at Miami. At Miami in week 4. Week off, Texas at home. Next week at Texas A&M. And then I believe you've got, I want to say maybe Georgia after that. So there are some of the teams that weren't great this year. And, there was a point in the season where we thought, hey, this schedule may be tougher than people thought. I mean, outside of FSU being a total disaster. Ole Miss was very good. Miami was having a great season. And Texas A&M was having a great season. But by the end of the season, A&M lost a bunch of games. Miami finished 10-3. It wasn't great. I think next year the schedule is going to be more difficult. Texas is going to have Arch Manning. Texas A&M, people think, could be a contender for the league title. Georgia's going to be Georgia. Tennessee's going to be Tennessee. FSU's not going to stink, I wouldn't think, this bad again. I mean, I don't know how it's humanly possible that they could be that bad again. And Kentucky's going to be on the road. And Zach, Kentucky's been a game that until this year had given Florida some trouble. Ole Miss is going to be on the road. How about this matchup? DJ Lagway versus former Gators commit Austin Simmons at quarterback. That's kind of cool. So it's going to be a challenge, but I feel like Florida, and I'm running on and on here, I feel like Florida's better equipped now, more equipped now, especially mentally, to go into next season, not just thinking they can do things, but knowing they can do things. There's proof There's finally proof of concept. Finally. So that's my take.
Yeah, and I think myself, it kind of goes back to what I was saying with getting experience with Jaden Baugh, with DJ Lagway. You have two guys that have significant experience, obviously, throughout the whole year, who are, especially Jaden Baugh, brimming with confidence, 5 touchdown performance against Kentucky, just kept getting better and better as the season went on. So you have to know going into next season, both these guys have plenty of experience. There's no excuse as far as, hey, these are young recruits. They played most of the whole year as starters. Returning 4 out of 5 offensive line stars, that's big. And like we noted before, Zach, obviously it's a really good wide receivers class, but you have some key guys returning. You get Sturdivant from UCLA, who's played in a lot of big games. So I think overall there's no excuse when it comes to that. And, Long Island and South Florida at home to kind of, like you said, if you want to say kinks, the early season kinks, to kind of work those out. Those are obviously 2 games they should win very convincingly. But kind of going back to what Keith said, week 3 and week 4, I said this past year that Miami game is probably going to set the tone. Like if Florida beats Miami, the momentum really starts building throughout the season. Obviously, they lost that one, but for 2025 at LSU and at Miami, those are 2 back-to-back tough games early in the season that you better be prepared for, because if you drop those, we know going into next season, Napier, obviously he's coming back for one more season, but he has to win next year. It has to be a solid season for him. And then after that, obviously you're off, and then Texas at home at A&M. You play Mississippi State at home before you play Georgia and Jacksonville. So either way, man, I mean, it's like Keith said, it's a difficult schedule. It's definitely framed a little bit different the way they kind of constructed the schedule. But it's definitely it's going to be interesting. But I think overall, there's really no excuses. A lot of their key guys have a lot of big game experience, and it's going to be about them living up to those expectations and playing big boy ball. They have to come out and play and win those big games. And talking to a recruit yesterday, I asked him, a 5-star kid, he said Florida flipped a switch in his eyes, and we asked him what it was. He said they started winning those bigger games. And he noted how, DJ Lagway didn't get hurt against Georgia, they probably maybe would have won that game. So obviously going into next year, though, there's no excuses. They have to kind of win those big games to show that, they're worth all the hype going into 25.
Yeah, and I think you guys hit on both points. That I had. Obviously, they got to improve the win total and keep that trajectory going. I think one thing that speaks to the state of the program and that it's in a good place right now is what we're seeing right now. I think this portal cycle, the last 2 portal cycles under Billy Napier, when there was still that transition period, when there was still a lot of roster turnover, you saw Florida losing 30 plus guys every offseason, and you saw them having to go get double-digit transfers and a ton of guys that needed to step in at starting spots and positions of need that they had to address. And this year, that's not where they're at as a program. That's not where they're at as a roster. That's not where they're at culturally. Like, you've gotten Caleb Banks and Austin Barber and Jake Slaughter all to come back. Shamar James is the only one that has decided to turn pro. We're still waiting on Tyreek Sapp, an announcement from Tyreek Sapp. Expect him to be back as well. Like, Florida's got the pieces, old and young, to kind of really build around. And then you see the guys that they've lost. Certainly they had some surprises and certainly a starter that left, but a couple starters actually, but not a lot of major attrition that we've seen the last couple of years. And Florida just wasn't at a place where they needed to go and do a lot of portal hunting. They certainly had some needs that they had to hit and some positions that they needed to improve, but they didn't need to turn over their roster in the offseason. And certainly they have the quarterback to build around. They got a ton of talent coming back on defense, and certainly an offensive line to protect their quarterback. We'll see what they do with their final spots that they could potentially add in the portal. But there's a lot for Florida to go out there and make a run. We'll start looking ahead and maybe in the offseason, give our projections on kind of what we think summertime the record could be in 2025. There's certainly going to be some must-win games. But the Gators are in a good place. And that was not what we could say as we were putting an end on last year. So we appreciate all of you for following Gators Online this year. We've enjoyed bringing you guys team and recruiting coverage. certainly it's not going to stop. Signing day is just around the corner, and we'll get to hear from Billy Napier about the transfers and some of the late additions that they made from the high school ranks. So appreciate all of you guys for listening, reading, subscribing. We'll have a bunch more content ahead in 2025. Happy holidays to everybody, and Happy New Year to you all. For Corey Bender and Keith Niebuhr, I'm Zach Albaverdi. Take care, everyone.